appreciative of the government keeping us safe from the virus. If this is them keeping us safe, imagine what it would look like if they wanted to do us some damage, eh? So, if you asked the average person in the street, in any one of these streets for example, whether we live in a free country, most people, I feel, would respond that yes we do.
Not a chance.
And they would say that we live in a democracy. Apparently the definition of a democracy is you get to put a cross on a bit of paper every 4 or 5 years. And then you put up with whatever gets thrown at you until the next 4 or 5 years when you can put another cross on a piece of paper. But most people would labour under the delusion that this is a free country and a democracy. So you could say to these same people, if the government of your country, or you could have said this to somebody at the start of this year, at least. If the government of your country placed restrictions on where you could go and when you could go there, if the government of your country told you what members of your family you're able to see, if you choose, if the government of your country told you how many people and who they are that you can have in your own home, if the government of your country tried to restrict you from operating your own business that you had spent years building up and put everything you own into it, if you'd said to people at the beginning of 2020, if you lived in that kind of society, would that be a democracy or would you live in some kind of communist or fascist state? I think most people would believe that those measures are the definition of fascism. And yet, here we are, living it. And the only reason it's been made to stick is because people have been trained and conditioned to believe lies.
Quiet but stealthy like.
And the way that this has been done is primarily through the treacherous mainstream media acting as mouthpieces for the tyrannical government. If nobody watched TV, if nobody picked up a so-called newspaper, if nobody listened to the radio so-called news, no one would have any idea that anything was different in society. So the perpetrators of the COVID-19 scamdemic, because that's what it is, in the mainstream media are every bit as guilty of treachery and crimes against humanity as the stooges and the puppets in government that are pushing all this madness. And they can take their place alongside them and be judged alongside them when that time comes. Because this is not any kind of pandemic. If it was, all of us would know people in our own lives who had died from this so-called virus. The bodies would be getting stacked up on the streets. We're not seeing that. Even by official figures coming out from the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control, this so-called pandemic has only affected a fraction of 0.1% of the population, with a survival rate of 99.997% or thereabouts. It's a monumental scam, and it's being done to remove our rights and freedoms under the guise of keeping us safe from this virus, which, as many speakers have commented today, hasn't even been shown to exist and hasn't been isolated in the way that it requires to be taken seriously. And there's another way that you can know when a society is heading dangerously towards becoming a communist or fascist state, and that is when a war is declared on joy and pleasure. Does this sound familiar? Every time one of these states has been created through history, you find that the dictators in government have removed people's ability to enjoy themselves and pursue pleasure. And that's exactly what we're finding in this narrative. We're being told that we can't go to certain places, we're being told we've got to be in at a certain time, we're being told we've got to wear bits of cloth over half of our faces to be admitted into these places. Now, there's a ban on singing in churches because apparently, I don't know what they think it is, the virus leaps down your throat when you open your mouth to sing, and it's straight in. A ban on dancing in pubs What's the difference? Is the idea that as you dance you kind of swish the air about a bit and these clouds of virus just go all over the pub and people start to breathe them in? Because there's another war that's been taking place this year as well, and it's a war on common sense. Common sense and dignity in terms of what we're being told about this amazing virus. Apparently it can count, it knows how many people are sat at a table, it knows what time it is, 9:59 in the pub, you're fine, 10:01, it's coming in, it's going to get you. The things we're being asked to believe, and how easily it's been adopted by people through the treachery of the mainstream media, just telling these lies. The masks, they do no good. Common sense tells you this. Even official sources are now letting you know that masks do no good in stopping diseases. Back in March, Chris Whitty, the chief medical advisor to the UK government, was saying that you shouldn't wear masks, that they're more detrimental to health than helpful. We got the same thing from Matt Hancock, less of the hand. We got it from Anthony Fauci in the United States. And the very same people who early on were telling us masks did no good are now telling us that we've got to wear them. It is tyranny. It's an outrageous imposition on our personal rights and freedoms, which, by the way, are given to us by the Creator. Rights and freedoms are not arbitrary whims and wishes of these imaginary institutions called governments that can be brought in as and when they choose. Rights and freedoms are endowed to us in creation, and no man or woman can take those away from us. We have the right to live freely so long as we are causing no harm. And we are causing no harm by going around without a face mask on. There is no harm being done there because the science doesn't stack up. We've been given bad science throughout this whole narrative, and we can know that there are ulterior motives here and other agendas at play. It's nothing about keeping us safe from any virus. Whenever rights and freedoms have been removed in history, the governments that have done it don't just hand them back on a whim or when you ask them nicely. They don't stop until they're made to stop, or until enough people refuse to comply with their own enslavement and their own tyranny. And that's what we need here. We need many more people to realise that we're being mugged off and lied to on a monumental scale. And to be honest, anyone can discover this for themselves. All you got to do is turn off the TV, stop listening to proven liars, and so much more when you get into the true nature of many of these politicians and these mainstream media perpetrators. And just spend 5 minutes at an internet keyboard with the will to want to learn something and with an open mind. And anyone can discover for themselves that we've been fed monumental disinformation and lies and bad science in this whole narrative. And when enough people realise this, they can really become a problem for the establishment, because we can then stop complying with our own enslavement and our own tyranny. If enough people just refuse to cooperate with what's being asked of us, if all these business owners that are being asked to shut down their livelihoods that they've spent their entire lives building up, what if all of them stood together, shoulder to shoulder, in unity and said, we're not doing it? If only a few did it, they could be picked off and made an example of. But if all of them stood together and said, this is an outrageous imposition on our freedoms and we are not going to comply with it, what could be done about that? It would become a real problem. We're at a point in history where we're all out of chances. And if we don't take back our rights and freedoms and assert our sovereignty at this time, we will not get another chance. Our children and our grandchildren are relying on us, those of us alive in this time and able to do something about this situation, to make the right choice. And there are only two sides in this: good and evil. There's no middle ground, there's no grey area here. Everyone must choose a side, and we will not get another chance like this. Thank you for coming today.
Big round of the mark, big round of the mark.